This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is September 25th, 2025.
I'm Scott Lonnebaum.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, leadership drama in the BC Conservatives and in the BC Greens, and federally, Carney's going postal. Patreon.com/Politicos. See, it's a double entendre because we're going to talk about guns and Canada Post.
And yet not the really dumb idea that was floated like 6 months ago or a year ago to have the post office be the ones collecting the guns.
That would have solved all their problems. No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't at all.
No, it was a terrible idea.
Let's start here in British Columbia, and I want to start with the BC Conservatives because their results came out first. We talked about drama in their leadership convention review process last week. We have more details on that. But first, we got the results of John Rustad's leadership review, and it's a stellar 71% support, Scott.
Yeah, so before we get into any of the other issues with that, like that alone's kind of an awkward spot to be. It's not quite as low as the 66, 67% that Joe Clark got and took as a sign that was insufficient support to carry on and kind of been the benchmark ever since, but it's not much better and hardly a resounding success. So it's yeah, you live to fight another day, but you're wounded with that number.
It's marginally better than Ontario NDP leader Merritt Stiles just got. I think she got 68% and decided to stay on with that, but has immediately started purging her head office and being like, we need a shakeup. Clearly, things aren't going well. John Rustad's shakeup was to fire a caucus member, but we'll get to that. In the review, a total of 1,268 members voted. That averages to 14 per constituency, although it's noted that 10 constituencies, I think it was, or at least 2, it's noted that at least a few constituencies had no one vote. There were a couple ties in a couple constituencies, and then Rustad lost a handful, and then he won the majority of them, which also not a resounding endorsement. That most people didn't even vote because they had this weird process where it seems like you had to show up to the right barbecue at the right time on the right weekend.
Yeah, so there's a weird process where like every riding association did their own vote and then just gets tallied up provincially, which is just a weird thing to do it. But also there's, allegations of some gaming system, but basically, the people would have some sort of like barbecue kind of event like you alluded to, and if you happen to show up, oh great, that also is when we're doing the vote, and not everyone was made aware of that ahead of time, so room for some gaming there.
Not just light gaming, but some heavier gaming was happening as well, as a report was handed to the party caucus in early September, which quickly found its way to all the media, which is how we had the stories last week. And Jen St. Dennis has published more detailed excerpts in a piece for the Tyee recently that highlights things like there were 2,238 party memberships that were, quote, manufactured in July and August. And almost all of those, 96%, were done on August 29th using the same credit card. And almost all of them failed address verification. So they were just like made up contributions to create members. Those are some of the dead people we talked about, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely sketchy too. Most of the party leadership sign-up processes I've seen, there's usually some kind of check involved where like either every transaction has to be a unique credit card, or there's a limit of like 4 or something, enough that like if a household all wanted to to get memberships, they didn't have to like individually find different credit cards to put that on, but not so much that you could just do a bulk sign up. The fact that that wasn't in place, or that only got flagged like well after the fact when it was just so blatant, doesn't say great things about the organization.
Someone inside the party was clearly doing something, because it also notes in the report a second sign up page was created where most of these fake memberships were bought through. So on your nation builder or whatever website you're running for your political party, you usually have a contribution page, but you can make multiple and they can all be used. It's a way to help track who's selling memberships, for example, if you want, or different campaigns and different ways of acquisition. There's lots of reasons you create multiple contribution pages, but for some, we don't know why one was created here, but one seemed to have been a problem. So someone in the party really wanted to make a whole bunch of fake signups, or at least they had created this page and then it got used to do this. Now, the party did void those memberships, so there's no allegation within their own report that people who shouldn't have voted did vote, but it does throw a whole bunch of flags that someone named Eleanor Sturko has been speaking out about in caucus and publicly more recently since, which is why, according to John Rustad, he needed her to get the fuck out of the party.
Well, that's
the day
kind
he
of
won.
the reason.
That's the official
He also
reason.
was the main allegation I saw that's coming from the Rustad camp on this isn't that Sturko was talking about the questionable membership process around the leadership review. It was that she was organizing a campaign against him, which is a little different. Sturko's version of it is she was just raising concerns about the, well, clearly kind of questionable stuff going on about it, and that was not appreciated, so got the boot.
It's really incredible, all aspects of this story, right? 71% is not a resounding show of support in a good situation, and here we have a not great leadership review. No one can look at this and go, wow, that went smoothly, and shows that BC Conservatives have strong opinions about their leader. It shows people fucked around. Maybe it all got cleared out in the end. There's no evidence it didn't, but it's enough to make you go, that didn't seem to go very well. And then he only got 71%. And then you cap it off with expelling a caucus member, which maybe is legitimate, but does seem to suggest some uncertainty with your strength of position as leader.
Yeah, none of these are moves you do if you're confident of your position. So, no idea who organized the sign-ups. Might have been the Rustad team, might have been someone else, but, if it was that team, that's not the sort of thing you do when you're confident of your position. If you do have a strong grasp of the party, you'd get more than 1,200 people to come out to support you on it. Like, the turnout numbers are just so low that's not exactly a stellar endorsement by the party membership. And you also don't start kicking people out of caucus on spurious grounds that they had leadership ambitions, which they're politicians. Of course they're going to have ambitions for stuff. That just comes with the territory. But you start doing all of that, and none of it says that you're in a particularly strong position. And honestly, Captain Sturko, who's one of the more prominent MLAs, was actually a huge boost to the Conservatives when they were still the fledgling upstart party a year ago.
Yeah, she was their third MLA, I believe.
Yeah, and kind of the one that who moved over that everyone looked up at that and went, oh, there's something there. This is a serious operation. She was a fairly high profile get for the BC Liberal. She was technically elected under a Liberal, right? Because they changed the one midterm.
I think it was like,
yeah.
I think her by-election was like right as they were doing the name change.
Yeah. So like, strong get for the party there. On that, like, fairly high profile MLA. So having to dispose of them in order to keep your leadership position stable. It may buy you a day or two, but like, by doing that, you are weakened.
Yeah, Sturko had her challenges in the Conservative caucus, as she is an openly lesbian woman, and spoke out against some of the... she had raised an issue where there were debates at, like, I think the Vancouver Police Board, and she was more critical or more supportive of some of the critics, and that pissed off some other caucus members who said it was inappropriate for her to weigh in. And I think there've just always been tensions between the like very socially conservative members of that caucus and her, who's more socially liberal, but they agree mostly on economic issues. And her hope was that, and the pitch of the Conservatives is it's the big tent party where they can all cohabitate and get along on the common issues. But so those tensions were continuing, and sometimes they bubbled up a little bit more publicly. Maybe you can see this situation as John Rustad shoring up the social conservatives who possibly have control of the party right now. Or at least wanting to reassure them that he's listening.
I mean, maybe, but like doing it in such a way, is that that's the Pyrrhic victory? Do you cause more problems than you solve on that one?
And no, it's not a position of strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like Rustad hasn't been willing to come out and stake fairly conservative positions out there. You can shore up support in other ways, and I don't know, I didn't hear a lot of signs of, the more right-wing conservatives celebrating Sturto being defenestrated. There probably were one or two, but like it didn't seem like there was a lot of champagne being popped on the right half of the party on this. It all seems kind of muted, and let's just get through this thing.
Perhaps they know when to not publicly celebrate, but it is an interesting observation. For Sturko's part, we don't know what I think this took her by surprise, right? It kind of shocked her, and she seemed... because she was literally pictured carrying her boxes out of the legislature, and we'll have to find a new place to hang out as an independent. Joining, I guess, Jordan Keeley is the other independent who
They should get together and start a new party. We don't have enough two-person parties yet.
I was going to say, that's all it takes, and they can be the independents party and get caucus money. And they would be the fifth party in the legislature with two people. And that's where we're at. So yeah, since the election, the BC Conservatives have now lost 4 MLAs, which is quite impressive. That's like 10% of their caucus.
Yeah, especially for a party that was like clearly on the upswing, and even now holding pretty well. But it's got to be easy for the NDP to be celebrating here because, hey, our opposition's in disarray and everything. That's always, a good feeling when the other side is causing problems for themselves. But, the polls aren't that far apart, and I don't know. They should be pretty worried that if a party that is that much of a giant mess is coming up pretty much tied, looking at 338 right now, and they're kind of 44 to 44 right now in the aggregator. That should be a real wake up call for them, because they clean house and fix themselves a little bit. They could easily pull ahead.
I don't disagree with that, with just the one caveat that we're like less than a year out from the last election. So the utility of polls right now is at its like lowest point, because people largely aren't paying attention, who aren't us or our listeners. And so do people know there is drama in the Conservative Party? probably not as much as they would otherwise. And a lot of vote parking happens right now. And I think it's just been votes parked since the election, and it will take another election or something to really start moving that. They're all just kind of like sitting at their stasis point. But it's not good news for the NDP that they aren't doing better. And they should find some energy to capitalize on a weak conservative opposition at the same time as they have, I'm not going to say, well, they have an interesting position of the BC Green Party, which brings us to the results of their leadership race. They have a new leader. Their voting concluded this week, and Emily Lowan is the new leader of the BC Green Party, the activist who turned 25 in the past week. Happy birthday, Emily.
Yeah, this was announced yesterday around 10 a.m., which, not doing a great job of dispelling the sense that the Green Party is mostly a party for like aging hippies and retirees and Saanich and the Gulf Islands.
But they elected a Gen Z, Scott.
Yeah.
Our first Zoomer our leader.
But, the party brass in organizing this definitely weren't going out of their way to dispel that by putting it middle of a work day.
I think, what time did the Conservatives announce their review? It was probably the same time.
Yeah, it was
and they both happened during UBCM, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
But
although leadership reviews a little less of a, hey, everybody look at us, we're doing something new and exciting.
Yeah, they could have done that better. So we talked a little bit about the issues the Green Party was having with verifications. The party celebrated that 67%, I believe, had been verified by the time voting closed, which doesn't seem like a number to celebrate. It's not terrible, but it's also like
the goal should be like 100%.
Yeah.
If you fall a little short of that and only like get 96% verified, yeah, that's...
People disappear. That's fine.
Yeah, there's some reasonableness on that one. Having a full third of the electorate unable to vote because of process issues, not great.
Nevertheless, the Greens were able to brag that they had 8,641 eligible voters, which is a pretty good membership base for them. That is on par or possibly slightly larger than the eligible voters for the BC Conservative Leadership Review, which is quite something, though we don't have the exact numbers for that. Notably, though, of that 8,600, 5,259 actually cast a ballot, so only 61% turnout. Now, turnout in party leadership races is usually pretty good. It's never 100%, but you can get 70, 80%. So only 2/3 of new members were verified, and then only 3/5 of members actually cast a vote. It's an interesting fall off in those. In any case, Emily Lowan, 3,189 ballots on the first vote, so she crushes it with 61%. Jonathan Kerr, 1,900. Adam Bremner Aikens, 128. And 14 people choose none of the above in the most green fashion.
Honestly, I'm a little surprised that last number wasn't a bit higher, considering how much the Greens really venerate participatory democracy. You think there'd be a few more that were like, I don't like any of these options, and rather than just not voting, I'm going to spoil my ballot.
I think it became pretty clear you have your two camps. You have your establishment Greens, the Jonathan Kerr, and you have your eco-socialist Greens, who went Emily Lowan. And I guess, unfortunately for Adam, he had 128 friends and supporters he managed to convince.
Yeah, got a little squeezed out on that one. Yeah,
I do hope he sticks around and like keeps working. I was impressed by his interview. I thought there's
I think of the
possibility there.
Yeah, of the three, I think he was the one that I came away the most impressed with, the most that exceeded kind of my expectations on it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure how many of these the Emily voters were eco-socialists versus just fairly standard like left-wing populist people who signed up for the the thing that was going on rather than going for the NDP leadership race if that was going on. Like, there's probably a lot of like cannibalization of the people who would have been NDP people in another time.
Definitely the ones who would have been eager to support Angeli Appadurai's leadership campaign before it ended. It was such a weird race, right? Because we saw the energy and momentum online from Lowan's efforts, and that was like it. I never saw anything from Jonathan Kerr. Like, I didn't actively look for it too much.
So a few videos he posted and stuff,
yeah.
but I mean, it was no disrespect to him, but a lot of it was kind of like the little stodgy, middle-aged, not a lot of high energy stuff that you'd kind of expect from someone in his position, a little stereotypically. Like, it didn't have the energy.
Mm-hmm. And so Lowan now inherits this party with two MLAs who feel more like Jonathan Kerr.
Yeah.
In energy and demographics. And I'm very curious how they're going to start to work together. They've both already said they're excited. They're, they said the right things, right? They're not going to throw their new leader under the bus. But
yet.
I'll be really curious to see how things start to shift, because they were the ones with Sonia Furstenau who signed the Karga agreement, the government, the confidence and supply agreement with the NDP, but that is set to be renewed and plans to renew on annual cycle. And so Lowan is going to have strong input onto what the Green Caucus might demand of the NDP, knowing that they don't have a ton of leverage, but maybe they don't renew under her, because her first speeches have all targeted the NDP very strongly.
Indeed, and this is a kind of interesting situation we've got here, because he, in some ways, more represents like a hostile takeover of the party rather than a more traditional approach to things of like the existing party membership really choosing their leader. The does appear a huge chunk of the voters were new signups on this, but that does create a problem where you basically have an existing Dream Party coalition, the one that elected the two MLAs that's responsible for getting the party to where it is and forms kind of the party apparatus, the base, your Gulf Island types and whatnot, and your, Elizabeth May types, I guess, what I'm looking for on that. And then you have someone who's coming in who's kind of very much a typical left-wing activist type that is, if anything, trying to take a party that is one that like doesn't neatly fit in the left-right ideological spectrum, that often gets dismissively pilloried by NDP types as, Tories with Teslas or Tories with bikes and stuff, and has a somewhat unique approach to politics that can't be like easily slotted into they're just the party that's left of the NDP. But that's kind of what their new leader is. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out, because there's a strong support from the people who showed up to this leadership race and went through the effort to participate in it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the people who've been longtime Green supporters and worked with the people who are now in the legislature as the Green Caucus are going to be entirely on board with all of that. And there is potential for some real culture clashes to come through on that. And it's going to be a leadership challenge to navigate that. And I'm curious to see how Lowan does on it, because even experienced politicians could struggle with that one.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with that, though I think I want to pick at a few different angles, because I can imagine some people bristling at the hostile takeover, even though I think it's a useful analogy to think around. Like, I think back at some of the other leadership races we've seen federally and provincially, and like, what was it? Pierre Poilievre signed up like 600,000 people, or some huge number for the federal conservative leadership race. Jagmeet Singh signed up a lot of people to win the NDP leadership race. Justin Trudeau signed up a lot of supporters when you just had to register for the federal Liberals. So that alone is not necessarily, and I get the idea that ideologically she might not fit the mold of the old school Greens, but it's important to recognize and acknowledge she comes from climate organizing first. Like, that's what she built on her resume and she talked up before anything else. Yes, her campaign pitch to, tax the billionaires and go after the oligarchs in the end.
The grocery stores are the one that really jumps out at me as the current fad in left populist politics.
Mm-hmm.
Makes no sense as a policy, but is kind of very much of the moment on that.
Yeah, and her and then the other aspect of it is there is definitely that old school Green, but I think what is recognized here, or what the opportunity is here, is Greens have been nationally in such a downturn for the last, most of the last decade. They had their kind of peak maybe a decade ago or so, and it's just been getting rougher since then. Provincially, they went from 3 MLAs down to 2, and they lost their leader, and their MLAs are new. Federally, their caucus, I think, what was its peak? 3 as well, and now it's 1 again.
Yeah, because you had
the Nanaimo
and Fredericton, both of who Manly and Nanaimo. I'm forgetting the Fredericton person.
Jenica Atwin, I want to say.
Yeah, who then jumped to the Liberals.
Yeah, and the NDP had 1 seats in PEI. The Vancouver Greens went from 3 down to 1 on council and lost other seats. So Greens are struggling today, and they need reinvention. Lowan presents an opportunity for that. She's not the only Green in the world taking that path. The new leader of the UK Greens actually fits a similar mold, young, lefty, Green kind of politics, and hoping to build a more populist view there. So I think there is definitely going to be clashes, because I also think, from what I've heard about the internal workings of the BC Green Party, that it hasn't been the healthiest place. And there were a lot of people quite loyal to Sonia Furstenau, and how they navigate will matter, because we've seen when Annamie Paul took over the federal Greens, things didn't go well. And you can blame her for that, you can blame the party, but it's clear no one got along and everything fell apart. And then Elizabeth May came back. I'm not going to predict a Sonia Furstenau return to the BC Greens. I don't think she has the same.
No, if anything, I would put Weaver as the one to throw his hat back in the ring.
Oh, I don't think Greens like him anymore.
Yeah,
he's just gone crankish.
He's the one that's discontent enough I could see wanting to stage a comeback.
Oh, you willed that into existence, and I hate it. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to watch the Green Party over the coming months. She's also got to, take the membership that she has now, which is an impressive membership for the Green Party, and build a fundraising machine off of that. What's going to be really interesting to look at out of, next month is the Q3 fundraising numbers that will include the Conservative sales over the summer, which is a mess because half of them got refunded, and the BC Green leadership fundraising numbers, which will also be kind of interesting because I know a lot of their youth memberships were allowed to sign up for free, and some of the younger members. So
right, that could be a lot at the base of the Lowan signups too.
Yeah, but she clearly did have a funded campaign, so there was some money there. So we'll see how that goes, and then especially in Q4, as Lowan and Rustad kind of move their leadership into this next phase. How do those parties start to evolve, and how does the BCNDP, who have a fundraising apparatus and have a clear base, but are potentially losing a bunch of them by running giant deficits and not really offering any vision about what they're doing with it.
Well, I don't think the NDP base really care about the deficit.
But it's the latter part. If you are spending a lot of money, but you also have teachers and unions mad at you, and like,
yeah, it's the nothing to show for all the money that's flowing out the door.
Yeah,
and at some point that starts to speak to competence as much of anything else, and yeah, that's potentially where they're going to take some hits on that. That said, that's probably not going to be a group of people who are going to be leaving the NDP voting bloc for the Lowan voting bloc, but it does narrow their path to victory to be losing some on that front, and then at the same time, a more energized, further left Green Party is going to be one that is going to eat at their left flank, and between that, they did really get squeezed quite a bit, particularly if the Conservatives do manage to right their ship. And that's going to be really interesting in the next election. I don't think Lowan's going to be able to pick up a bunch of new seats for the Greens. The parts of the province she appeals to most, or will appeal to most, are going to be the places that are heavy NDP locks. Most, I could see maybe one seat in Victoria being put into play, but even that's kind of doubtful. But what could happen is the NDP has part of their flank collapse, and in a bunch of the close ridings that shifts things, particularly as they lose a bit on the right too.
I don't disagree with that. The one thing I do wonder as well is if Lowan is able to pick up non-voters, that like mythical opportunity of expanding the voting core of people who've been disillusioned for a while. But
I think mythical's probably the right word on that, because I don't know, I've seen this with the Conservatives, I've seen this with people on the left too, that there's this sense that like if only we were like true to our ideological core and presented an uncompromised vision of that, the vast majority of the public are secret conservative / lefties, depending on whichever one's being talked about here, who will rally through their apathy and come out for us, and we will win. And that's just never happened.
We did see more people vote federally in 2015 when Justin Trudeau gave people
but that's a change election, though. Like, and that was we're throwing the bums out, and like that's when you see surges in voting participation, is when people get tired enough that everyone kind of agrees they need a change. The low turnout elections are things are kind of humming along fine. I don't really need to rush the boat on any of it, and even so, like that one, not like the NDP shot up on it. It was the more establishmenty liberals.
The other challenge for Lowan, of course, is she doesn't have a seat in the legislature. She is not going to ask either MLA to step aside for her. She respects that they put in the work and earned those seats. She has said she will contest the first viable by-election that comes up, which is a smart enough way to frame it to say, I'm not going to waste my time in an unwinnable seat, but I'm also open to running.
Yeah, trouble is the list of viable seats is pretty small.
That's true. It's true. So I think the last thing I have on the Greens is like the other issue they have is just the structural issue with her not having a seat, is getting attention in the next, 2-3 years and managing to break through and get media headlines is going to be really hard. They got this week because she got elected, and that's interesting. What's her next story, and how does she keep up that momentum? Is she able to leverage social media followings to reach out to audiences that way? It's just going to be a long, hard slog. And, the Greens are still at pretty low in the polls provincially, and managing to get back to even the 15-20% they were at, 10 years ago will be some work to do.
I will say she's probably one of the provincial politicians that does seem to have like one of the better grasps of the more like attention focused short form video based communication methods these days.
You don't think John Rustad is like a great TikToker?
No, but neither do I think David Eby or really like pretty much anyone in either of those two caucuses are. Like the bar in PC politics is so low on this one. Like you don't have to be the next Obama to clear it.
You know, like I do think there's one or two people in the NDP caucus who could pull it off, but they're not focused on building a social media following right now. They're just trying to like manage their portfolio. Like I think Bowen Ma could do pretty well on social media, and there's a couple other MLAs, but they're just not doing that work. And Lowan clearly is putting the energy and focus there. So, like you said, wide open field, easy to lead that. They did all get the chance to present their vision as right out of this. They got to speak at UBCM, as UBCM also always lets leaders of each political party. I think the funniest part is that one BC interim leader, I didn't realize she was interim, Dallas Brody, got to give the first speech, which Castanet notes was sparsely attended. That's the best. I don't want to talk about her speech. I just want to note that it was sparsely attended. Good for you, local politicians. Keep away from the crazies. Rustad spoke. In the front row was Eleanor Sturko staring him down the whole time.
Just like an amazing little bit right there.
Yeah, what else she got to do? And I think Emily Lowan had a reasonably attended speech as well. So, finally, in the province, the Supreme Court of Canada has done an initial weighing into the never-ending ostrich saga. Things were looking promising on Monday as the CFIA had moved into enforce the cull orders finally, to which
with the RCMP accompanied them.
Yes, and it wasn't. It was. I was reading it. They were like citing the Animal Welfare Act or something that they had to enforce this under, and I'm like, that's, I mean, accurate. And it just felt more obscure than like the RCMP showing up for a criminal code thing. But the animals survive another day as their farm's lawyers went to the Supreme Court and have a brief injunction to at least try to get their ongoing appeal heard at the Supreme Court of Canada.
This is so goddamn ridiculous at this point. So the initial outbreak of avian flu was back in, December of 24? So 9 months ago. This is apparently a particularly contagious strain, which is why CFIA was so concerned about this. It's now the end of September. It's taken forever. And let's all be very thankful this was not ground zero of the next pandemic. Don't want to have to deal with one of those again, particularly one that might be worse than the last one. But if it was, we would have been so screwed if it took 9 months to start to address the focal point of one. This is just no way for a serious country to conduct its affairs. You find the flu in the ostrich flock, you kill the ostriches, and if it turned out to be an overreaction, then you can sue for compensation afterwards. This is one of those things where, if there's a problem, the law gives a very good remedy, which is have one person give the other person money to settle the loss on that one. You don't need to drag it out for 9 months, all the while potentially causing another outbreak and another pandemic just because you don't want to have to start over with an ostrich flock. And the courts should not humor these people. Get to speedy resolutions. This, like I said, this is just no way for a serious country to conduct its affairs, and this is we got lucky, but head should roll for this one.
Lots of important things to remember here. Number one, there's a lot of I think there's this vision that this ostrich farm is like a petting zoo, and that these are because they're you go to their website now and they have profiles of each of their ostriches, but it's a livestock farm. They were raising these for food and leather and breeding.
Also, ostriches are kind of a little mean. They're not cuddly pet things you want to pet.
So they're cranks who were doing cattle farming. They're cranks because they also refused to get vaccinated, and during one wildfire evacuation order, I believe they also refused to leave their farm. So this is a family with a history of refusing public orders, whether for their own safety or the safety of the broader community. In this case, yeah, I have no clue why the initial call orders were not undertaken faster. I don't know if the CFIA agents were somewhat sympathetic to the pranks, or if there was like a little bit of fear that they would because they did mobilize all the way up to RFK Jr. speaking out on their behalf. It didn't work. It's not just the court shouldn't humor them. The cops shouldn't have humored them because they made it worse by letting them get momentum. And now there's all this like pseudoscience spreading that, oh, maybe these ostriches have some miracle cure to avian flu. No, some just didn't die. A lot died last year on that farm. Hundreds of their birds died from avian flu, which is when we should have killed the rest of them to prevent it. Or at least, justly applied the standards that CFIA has. Maybe you don't like those, but at least they would have been consistently applied. It's a mess and an embarrassment to our province and country. Glad to be on the same page.
Indeed. Well, speaking of embarrassing messes, the federal public safety minister found himself in one in the lead up to the announcement of the next stage of the gun buyback program, when turns out he was talking to a constituent who is also his tenant about the program, and basically told the tenant, yeah, this thing isn't going to work. We're doing it for political reasons to make the Quebec voters happy. But agreed it wasn't going to be, or that the legal gun owners weren't going to be the problem, or weren't the problem behind firearms in the country.
So pro tip, always record your landlord, especially when they're public safety minister. Nothing bad happens from it, and sometimes it's very funny.
Incredibly funny. Disappointingly, though, not enough of an embarrassment, I guess, to like make them reconsider it. The guy was pretty clear in the audio that they're basically just doing this because they got saddled with it from the Trudeau government and didn't feel like changing it. But you don't have to go ahead with it, especially when even the minister thinks it's a waste of money.
I think Carney's options here were to either cancel the program or sack the minister by saying, like, no, he was lying. We believe in this. It's double down, but at least throw him under the bus. Both?
Because this minister,
of course, you could do both, but
yeah, this minister. The only time I ever hear about him is when there's a bad headline for him. Like, he's not exactly knocking it out of the park on the file. Which, granted, it's been a while since we've had like a public safety minister that's done a stellar job on it.
I was about to say it's not a forgiving role.
I feel like the Harper era ones were less prone to doing bad, dumb things, but
they didn't put their foot in their mouth. But
Vic
they had their Vic Taves.
He wasn't great. Anyway, it's a serious file that we should insist serious people run, and that has not always been the case. Anyway, it's just a bad look for the government. They went ahead with and announced the pilot program in Cape Breton Island, but I don't know, the program never made any sense. It's taken 5 years to get to this point. It was in theory a major public safety emergency that required, all of those guns to be banned and collected. It's been 5 years. There hasn't been another major crime with those guns. It's clearly not been so important to actually do this in an expeditious manner. In the meantime, the political consensus on this has evaporated in large parts of the country. Like, it's
not
all
Quebec,
around.
Though.
Yeah, which is, also not great. Like, imagine a conservative government, like, announcing some like controversial thing, and then like leaked audio comes out that they're only doing it to keep voters in Saskatchewan happy. Like,
no one cares about voters in Saskatchewan, even conservatives.
But like people would be pissed over
Especially conservatives. But yes. Like, I'm not fundamentally opposed to a gun buyback program. We have seen them work effectively in countries like Australia and be done elsewhere. And so I think there is a good argument for it, and that could be done in a way that helps there be fewer guns. I'm generally in favor of fewer guns. Fewer guns means fewer chances of people using them for crime or domestic violence. That's cool. This is a mess.
There's
anyway.
just better ways to spend. Was it like $500 million, couple $2 billion on this? That's
only supposed to be a few tens of millions.
Well, they've already spent a few tens of millions before they've even collected the first gun. We talked like a year ago about how the program had already racked up $60 million in spending and hadn't collected a single gun at that point. But yeah, like also the main difference with Australia is that it doesn't have the United States right on its border with all of their guns. And like the overwhelming amount of guns used in crimes in Canada, including the mass shooting that precipitated this, are guns smuggled in from the States. Like, you want to spend $1 billion making the public safer by dealing with guns in this country? Put a whole lot of that into anti-smuggling operations and border security, because that's the thing that will actually take the crime guns off the street. And just to cap it all off, they did scale back one little bit of this. So part of the pitch on this that came a couple years into it was, these are all, assault-style weapons, which is, a bullshit term that's not a real category of guns.
They're scary looking.
Yeah. These are military style, which, tip, anytime someone attaches style to a description of a gun, it's not a technical term. Someone's using it for rhetorical flourishes at that point. But we're going to take these and give them to Ukraine to help them in their fight against Russia. Turns out they're not actually all that suitable to military uses, and the Ukrainians were like, nope, none of these meet our standards, so you can keep them, which does kind of put to lie the whole these are just military guns that we need to get out of the hands of civilians.
Shocker, the country in a hot war does not want, like, Value Village guns donated by charity. It was such a weird announcement when they said they were going to send these over there. I remember kind of laughing at the time, going, that's pathetic. What a joke. We can send aid. If we're going to send aid, send something real. But it's like sending pictures of food to starving kids.
Yeah. Anyway, final thought on this is just, part of Carney's appeal is that he is not Trudeau, and he can turn the page on a few of the less popular and less well thought out parts of the Trudeau legacy, and a poorly conceived program that was mostly about political symbolism and not public safety, that is also going to cost a bunch of money at a part where the government is looking to tighten its belt, would be a great thing on the chopping block, particularly because it's not actually going to be effective in advancing public safety. If every minister is supposed to be finding 15% to cut, well, I've got a great one for public safety to focus on.
It's ironic because I think the program that was actually pretty well thought out and starting to have some effect was the carbon tax, but the Conservatives had hammered that for years. Another shift Carney has taken is he has taken the step for Canada to recognize the state of Palestine. Canada did so, joining allies Australia and UK of doing it at the same time. France had teased this a month or two prior. This was all pretty well telegraphed.
Yeah, they announced that they were going to do this back in August.
And then, like, last week, I think Anita Anand was coming out saying, it'll be a conditional one, and then it was a little bit more firm, but they're still kind of like, we're recognizing the state, but we're not going to have relations until like Hamas doesn't exist, and we're only going to work with
yeah, there's
and they're going to demilitarize.
There's a bit of an incoherence on this. So back in the end of July, July 30th, they put out the Prime Minister of Canada put out an announcement on the PM's website with this, and there were a bunch of conditions attached. Release of all the hostages, must disarm, and play no role in the future governance of Palestine, and that the Palestinian Authority must hold elections in 2026. None of those have actually happened, and the conditions that were in that press release are notably absent in the one that was put out. I mean, they're alluded to a little bit, but they're not as clear cut, and it's a little baffling why they laid out conditions only a month or two ago and then aren't insisting the conditions be met before doing it.
Keir Starmer talked him into it, or the Australian Prime Minister. I don't know. Like, the previous statement positions weren't really coherent. We don't have conditions on recognizing, France or most countries in the world. And most countries in the world do recognize the state of Palestine. And the reality is, they're at the rate Israel's going, there won't be a state of Palestine in very much longer as they continue to move more and more military into Gaza and occupy the West Bank. So it's a statement that comes without anything, so it didn't really make the pro-Palestine critics very happy on that side, and it's made the more pro-Israel critics also mad. So Mark Carney, good job on pissing everyone off. That's not the sign of doing it right, as a hint. Some liberals think it is, I think, but
yeah, I do gotta wonder if a little bit of this was we'll make the people happy on the Palestine side with the headline, and then we'll deal with any of the blowback with the conditions, and in doing so made no one happy.
What I actually found interesting is I read Canada's, Australia's, and the UK's statements, and they were each different. There's been times when the three countries, or New Zealand is sometimes in there, release statements, and you can tell they crafted what lines they want to say and they're just identical, and they all come out at the same time. This, they all had the broad same strokes, but I think Canada's was a little bit mid of the road. The UK's was a bit more sympathetic to Israel, and Australia's was a little bit more sympathetic to Palestine, perhaps. But there was local dynamics at play in each of those three. But nevertheless, the UN is meeting, and they wanted to have this statement out for that as the world continues to try to pressure Israel to cut it off a bit, in tepid terms.
I am a little curious what's going to happen in 2026 if the Palestinian Authority, which hasn't held elections for 20 years, continues not to hold elections. Are we going to withdraw this?
I don't know how they could do an election right now, materially, but it's such a mess.
Middle East is complicated, which we're not going to be able to figure out. Something that has flummoxed the smartest geopolitical minds. So maybe we should pivot to the final story.
Mail. Canada Post, we got an announcement earlier this week that, the government was planning a review of Canada Post and how to keep the Crown Corporation afloat. And this morning, they announced a raft of changes they're going to introduce, which was met with pretty quickly with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers escalating their job action from, we're not going to deliver flyers, to, we're not working until we drop this. They escalated fast.
Yeah, this thing kind of changed everything. I'm not sure it's quite true to say that the government announced that. It's so much as they said that as part of the review, some previous conditions that other past governments had put in place were not going to be insisted upon, and there was more room for Canada Post to take a wider view of things. One of those was a policy put in place in 1994 that no rural post offices could close. They're looking at the home delivery, the small fraction of Canadians that still get home delivery and aren't on the communal mailboxes.
Yeah, that's me. I get it. It's nice.
I had it for a bit. Most of my life growing up, we were on the communal mailboxes. When I lived in a couple apartments in Vancouver, it was either the mail in the one, or even one apartment building I actually had. The postal people would go door to door, and there was a mail slot every door.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was actually kind of nice. Don't think it's worth the post office losing $1.5 billion a year over, but it wasn't bad to have that service. Notably, the Harper government also made a similar move back in 2014, 2015, and Trudeau ran against it and reversed it. Right now, it's estimated to be costing the post office something like $500 million a year just to continue that part of the postal service. And most Canadians don't have it. It would be fine to just level the playing field on that one, and everybody does it. But it was one of those things where early Trudeau was very keen on being seen as a change from Harper, and reversed a bunch of politically tough decisions the Harper government made that would have set things up for a more long-term sustainable path, but in the process annoyed some people, and those didn't last all that long into the new government. But Canada Post would be in a better financial shape today if that had been allowed to stay back then.
Well, it's almost like first past the post leads to wild policy swings that aren't always the best choice. I think the home delivery thing ends up being a bit more of a smoke. It's an important part of this debate, but it's probably on the way out, as you say, regardless. I think the more substantive things is the effect this could have on rural post offices. They're also talking about making deliveries slower by allowing them to go more mail to go cheaply by ground than air, which kind of just makes the mail, everything they're talking about makes Canada Post a little bit worse if the corporation chooses to do it all. And none of that screams to me long-term financial success. Yeah, you can cut costs in the short term, but if Canada Post is, 40% worse in 3 years than it is today, people are going to use it that much less, further straining its fund. There's nothing ambitious or clever in here.
Well, I don't think the problem is what their service levels are. The problem is email. The fundamental reality is that the post is just not all that important anymore. Most important documents that once traveled by mail now are delivered electronically, and letter volumes have just collapsed. The post office and the whole setup is built for 3 times more mail than currently runs through the country, and it's not a service supply problem that drove it. It's the fact that a technology came along that basically rendered pigment on dead trees an obsolete method of communication for huge chunks of the economy and society. And literally nothing Canada Post can do can change that, short of convincing the federal government to ban email nationwide, which is ridiculous and never going to happen. Nothing's going to turn back the clock on this. We might as well be asking how we can help the carrier pigeon industry survive. It's just largely a thing of the past, and there's still a role for some postal service, but it's going to need to adapt to the time, and just insisting that it's still 1994 isn't going to be the way to do it. And we should be looking at stuff addition to the home delivery, yeah, maybe closing some of the post offices that just don't have the usage to justify maintaining their operation. We should honestly be looking at going down to maybe like twice a week delivery for some stuff, and yeah, not flying the stuff across the country and putting on ground probably makes a lot of sense, and also going to be more climate friendly too.
Like, you said it in that it's the postal service. The fact that it's trying to be run as like a profitable business is the problem. Like, it shouldn't bleed money. Royal Mail doesn't bleed money. Royal Mail's set up very weird. I was just looking at it, but it actually turned a profit this year. It's like privately run, but the UK government is a golden shareholder these days, which screams like Thatcher did that. But, you know, it is possible to have a national mail service that isn't broke. And it may not even get to profitability because, hell, it's a public service. And it's like, if you want to have a country, you need to be able to get messages from one end to the other. Yeah, a lot of those messages are emails these days or digital, but there's still a very important value to moving things. And sometimes it's letters, sometimes it's parcels. Like Canada Post, in my dream scenario, we have this problem of exploited workers delivering packages for Amazon. Canada Post could be moving much stronger and putting far more emphasis into its package and parcel delivery service, but seems to have flubbed it hard and let so many other competitors just dominate while their management just like fucked around and wasted money over this past few years.
I remember a few years back, Canada Post was putting a lot of emphasis on the parcel delivery. The fact that they got outcompeted in the market, I don't think necessitates that they like screwed up giantly. It might just be that a super tanker behemoth doesn't exactly turn quickly, and it's hard to make those changes.
Well, like its parcel delivery
particularly when when the union goes on strike, the minute someone suggests that maybe we need to revisit the how we do things.
The union's in the middle of negotiations, and the government basically just dropped this bomb of like, what if we let the management do whatever they want? And the union's naturally expressing its power to say, we're in the middle of negotiations. We want to settle our negotiations before we talk about the future. Or if we're going to talk about the future, let's talk about the future. Because Cup W has put forward lots of ideas for improving Canada Post. Postal banking is a bit of it. The government, we've talked about in the past, did take some of that up with its weird partnership with Coho, where they did the like privatize or, the contracted out online banking. Cup W's talked about online banking as an option, putting more, some of the other ideas are a little bit smaller scale, but, more EV charging stations and using post offices as community centers. Like, I think the challenge is you need to be a country, you need to be able to have public services that can get things to your remote corners. Those private parcel services that outcompete Canada Post can do so because they don't deliver daily to people in Tuktoyaktuk or even weekly or at all. They rely on Canada Post. And so this corporation, whether it exists outside of government or comes back into a ministry, which is where it started, has to survive in some form. And
it's that some form that I think's the key point here, because, right now, a lot of flyers and junk mail and like one or two bits of actually useful mail correspondence, is not exactly the thing that's the backbone of the nation. Like, a bunch of that is just stuff that the post office does to like stay afloat, delivering things of limited value, and we ought to be putting serious thought into what the structure looks like. And yeah, we should continue to have some kind of delivery service, but does it need to look anything like it does now, particularly if it's $1.5 billion money pit right now? It's probably not. Like, I get, I don't know, maybe a couple pieces of mail a month that were in any way useful or relevant. And if the frequency in which everything showed up changed from daily to weekly, like, I don't think my life would be any poorer for it. And if it saves a bunch of money, that's good. Like, yeah, it's a service, but like, revenues do have to approximate expenses in order for it to be sustainable. And if that isn't the case, like, there needs to be a serious question of, do you get value for money by putting a bunch of public subsidy into it? And I don't see the argument for that on we need to do, daily delivery directly to the door for a lot of this stuff compared to weekly delivery at a centralized location.
And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.